Ryan and David were neighbors in 2022. Both rented. Both wanted to buy. The same house came up on their block at the same time. 3 bedrooms, fair shape, $385,000. The rate that week was 5.8%. David bought it. Ryan didn't. Ryan was going to wait 6 months for rates to drop. That was 4 years ago. The house is still on Ryan's block. David is still living in it. And this week, on June 11th, 2026, Fannie Mae announced that the rate forecast they'd been promising all year just got walked back. The drop everyone was waiting for is now projected at 6.4%, not 6%, through 2027, which gives us something rare in personal finance. A controlled experiment. Same starting point, same neighborhood, same week, 2 different choices, and 4 years of receipts. We can finally measure who actually won. We're going to run that math. Not the version your real estate agent gives you, where buying always wins. Not the version Reddit gives you, where waiting is always smart. The real math, including the things both sides leave out. Because the question isn't, should you wait? The question is, what would have to be true for waiting to actually win? Here's what Professor Wealth found. The strategy Ryan used isn't crazy. It has a name. Marry the house, date the rate, and it's been everywhere for 4 years now. Real estate agents say it. Lenders say it. Half the financial advice channels on YouTube say it. The idea sounds reasonable on the surface. Rates are temporary. The house is permanent. Buy now if you have to, and refinance later when rates come down. Or, if you don't have to buy now, just wait. Let rates settle, let prices cool, then move when the conditions are better. Ryan picked the second version. He had 2 years of savings ready to go. He'd been pre-approved. He was ready. But the rate felt high. 5.8% felt high in 2022, even though by historical standards it was middle of the road. And rates moving was the one variable he thought he could time. So he waited. Here's the thing about the strategy. It's not built on one assumption. It's built on 3, stacked on top of each other. And almost nobody talks about more than the first one. Assumption number 1, home prices won't rise enough to eat your interest savings. Assumption number 2, rates will actually drop enough on a timeline you can live with. Assumption number 3, when rates drop, you'll actually be able to refinance, and the refi math will pay for itself after the closing costs. Ryan made all 3. The math of the next 4 years quietly broke 2 of them. Most people watching this video are making at least one of them right now. So before we run the numbers on Ryan and David, let's walk through each assumption, what it requires, and what actually happens when it doesn't hold. We're going to start with the assumption that does the most damage, even though it's the one almost nobody talks about. Assumption 1. Prices stay flat while you wait. Here's the part most people get backwards. When you decide to wait for rates to drop, you're not just betting on rates. You're also betting that the thing you want to buy won't get more expensive while you wait. And historically, that's a hard bet to win. National home prices, measured by the Case-Shiller Index, are up about 11% from the middle of 2022 to today. That's not pandemic-era growth. That's actually slower than average appreciation by the long-run standard. Some markets did more, some did less. A few markets, pockets of Texas and Florida, actually fell a little. But the national picture is unambiguous. The house Ryan wanted to buy in 2022 costs more in 2026 by a meaningful margin in almost every market in the country. Let's put that on Ryan's specific house. In June 2022, it was $385,000. At the national average rate of appreciation, the same house today is worth roughly $428,000. That's about $43,000 more, almost a year's salary for a lot of people. Sitting on the same property, in the same neighborhood, behind the same front door. Ryan didn't gain that. David did. And here's the part where the math gets ruthless. The whole premise of waiting is that a lower rate later will more than make up for the price moving in the meantime. So you have to weigh the savings of a lower rate against the cost of a higher price. The trade-off isn't symmetric. When prices go up, you don't just pay more. You have to put a bigger down payment together. You borrow a bigger amount, and you pay interest on the bigger amount at whatever the new rate happens to be. The price increase compounds through every line of the deal. There's a simpler way to feel this. The interest savings from a meaningful rate drop on Ryan's old loan size, say, a half-point drop from 5.8% to 5.3% on a $308,000 loan, would save him about $90 a month, or roughly $1,100 a year. Real money. But $43,000 of price appreciation, financed at any rate above zero, swamps $1,000 a year of interest savings for at least a decade. The price move is bigger than the rate move, by a lot, and it doesn't undo itself when rates eventually come back down. So the first assumption of the waiting strategy is the dominant one. Not the loudest, the dominant. To win by waiting, prices need to be roughly flat or fall during the wait. That's not what usually happens. That's not even close to what happened in this cycle. Assumption 2. Rates drop enough on a timeline you can live with. Now we get to the part of the story Ryan actually thought about. Rates moving down. This is where every wait for rates to drop pitch lives, and it's worth being honest about the historical record. Professor Wealth pulled the data going back to 1971. In any given year where the 30-year fixed rate was in the range we're sitting in today, somewhere between 5.5% and 7.5%, the rate dropped a full percentage point or more within the following 24 months, about 1 time out of 4. 23% of the time. That's not zero. Rates do come down. They came down hard from 1981 through 1986. They came down again through the 1990s. They came down after the 2008 crisis. They came down during the pandemic. But there are 2 quiet conditions buried inside that 23%. The first is that you have to be willing to wait potentially 2 full years, sometimes longer, for the move to happen. And you have to be okay with the possibility that it never does. The second is that even if rates drop, they have to drop by enough to make refinancing pencil out. We'll get to refi costs in a minute, but for now, just hold this thought. A quarter-point drop is not a refi. A half-point drop is often not a refi either. The industry rule of thumb is that you need roughly a full point of drop before the math on refinancing starts to work, and even that depends on how long you stay in the loan. And then there's the third quiet condition, which is the one Ryan ran straight into. Even if you're right about the direction, you can be very wrong about the timing. Ryan thought rates would drop in 6 months. 6 months turned into a year turned into 18 months. 18 months turned into, well, maybe next year, when the Fed starts cutting. And here we are in June 2026, 4 years later. The Fed has cut 3 times. Mortgage rates are higher than when Ryan started waiting. 2 days ago, Fannie Mae walked back its forecast for the second time this year and is now projecting the 30-year to hold at 6.4% through the first quarter of 2027. That's the part the strategy never tells you. The probability of being right is one thing. The probability of being right on a timeline that doesn't bury you in rent is another. And the cost of being wrong on the timeline shows up nowhere in the calculation. Assumption 3. Now suppose rates do come down. Suppose you bought a house at a higher rate and you're sitting on the date the rate plan. Refinance when the window opens. Here's the assumption most pitches skip entirely. Refinancing isn't free. Closing costs on a refinance typically run between 2% and 5% of the new loan amount. On a $300,000 loan, that's somewhere between $6,000 and $15,000 paid upfront every time you refi. Some of it gets rolled into the loan, which feels painless, but just means you're financing the closing costs over 30 years. The math on whether a refi is worth it isn't complicated. You take your monthly savings from the new rate, divide it into the closing costs, and that tells you the break-even point, the number of months you need to stay in the loan before the refi has paid for itself. Past that point, the refi is making you money. Before that point, the refi has lost you money. Here's a real-world version of that math, run on a borrower who actually exists in 2026. Suppose someone bought in June 2025 at the prevailing rate at the time, 6.84%. Suppose they refinance today at 6.52%. That's a 32 basis point drop, which sounds like progress. Their loan is $328,000. Their old payment was $2,147. Their new payment is $2,077. Monthly savings, $70. Now run the refi cost. At 2.5% of the loan, that's $8,200 in closing costs. Divide $8,200 by $70 a month, and the break-even is 118 months. Nearly 10 years. If that borrower sells the house or moves before 10 years are up, which most homeowners do, the refinance has cost them more than it saved. That's the trap inside the "you can always refinance later" pitch. It assumes the rate drop will be big enough to clear the closing costs. The 32-point drop most date-the-rate buyers got isn't big enough. To break even in 5 years on a typical refi, you need a drop of roughly 60 basis points or more. To make refinancing genuinely worth it for a typical homeowner who might move within 10 years, the industry rule of thumb has always been a full percentage point. So the third assumption requires not just a rate drop, but a big rate drop. And not just a big drop, but one that arrives before you sell the house. Ryan didn't have to worry about this one. He never bought, so he was never going to refi. But for every viewer who took the date the rate pitch in 2022 or 2023, this is the math that's been silently working against them ever since. 3 assumptions, each one a coin flip, and not a fair one. Stack 3 of them on top of each other, and you've built a strategy on a tower of conditions that have to all hold. So what actually happened? Let's run the numbers on Ryan and David. Same starting point, June 2022. Same house, $385,000. Same rate available, 5.8%. Same 20% down payment of $77,000, leaving a loan of $308,000. David's path. He closed in late June. His monthly principal and interest came out to $1,807. He's made 48 of those payments now. The total he's paid into the loan over 4 years is $86,746. About $69,500 of that went to interest. About $17,200 went to principal. His loan balance has come down from $308,000 to roughly $290,800. On top of the loan, he's paid property tax and homeowner's insurance. Call it $6,300 a year average, $25,100 over the 4 years. Meanwhile, the house has appreciated. At the national average, it's now worth about $428,000. David's equity in the house, the difference between the home's value and what he still owes, is sitting at roughly $137,000. Of that, $77,000 is his original down payment, which he hasn't lost. It's still his, just sitting in the form of a house. About $17,000 of it is principal he's paid down through his monthly payments, and about $43,000 of it is pure appreciation, value the house gained while he owned it. Now, Ryan's path. Ryan kept renting. He started at $1,850 a month and got hit with rent increases every year that roughly tracked the broader rental market. About 8% the first year, then 5.5%, then 4.1%, then 3.6%. Over the 4 years, his total rent paid came to $97,662. That money is gone. There's no equity behind it. Nothing to sell. Just receipts. His down payment, the $77,000 he was protecting by waiting, sat in a high-yield savings account at about 4.5% blended yield over the period. It grew to about $91,800. So he gained roughly $15,000 in interest on that money. A real return, not nothing. Now the awkward part. Ryan calls the listing agent today. The same house is back on the market. He wants to buy it. The new price is $428,000. 20% down is $85,600. He has just barely enough. His new loan is $342,500. At today's rate of 6.52%, his monthly principal and interest works out to $2,169. That's $362 a month more than David's $1,807 for 30 years. If Ryan buys the house today and stays in it for the full loan, he'll pay roughly $130,000 more in payments than David will on the same house, just because of when each of them entered the market. Add it up. David is sitting on $137,000 of equity, having paid about $112,000 in interest, taxes, and insurance over 4 years. Ryan is sitting on $92,000 of liquid savings, having paid $98,000 in rent. Net them out, take both apples to apples, and David is ahead by roughly $31,000 today and locked in a $362 a month lower payment for the next 30 years. Ryan wasn't being foolish in 2022. He just made a bet that quietly required 3 conditions to hold. None of them did. This is the part of the math worth slowing down for, because it changes how you should think about your own decision today. Let's take the question seriously. Forget who actually won. Ask instead, what would the world have had to look like 4 years ago for Ryan to come out ahead? Hold David's path fixed. Run the experiment over and over, changing the assumptions one at a time, and find the conditions under which waiting wins. Start with home prices. If prices had stayed exactly flat over 4 years, zero appreciation, not even matching inflation, David would still come out ahead by a small margin. For Ryan to actually catch up, prices would have had to fall by about 2.9% over the 4 years. Not rise less, actually decline. The national index moved the other direction by more than 11%. In most markets, even the softest ones, prices grew at least slightly. The wait strategy didn't just need prices to cool, it needed them to drop. They didn't. Now hold prices where they actually went and adjust the rate instead. Suppose Ryan buys today at the appreciated price, but rates have moved in his favor. What rate would Ryan need today? Just for his monthly payment to match the one David has been making since 2022. The answer is 4.85%. That's a full point and a half below today's 6.52%. A move on the order of what happened during the pandemic when emergency policy slashed everything. And remember, even if rates fell that far tomorrow, Ryan still has to pay back the $98,000 in rent he already paid while waiting. He still missed 4 years of equity growth on the house. The lower rate just gets him to a tie on the monthly bill going forward. It doesn't recover any of what he already spent. So the honest framing of the waiting strategy looks like this. You're betting that prices will fall and rates will drop materially, and you'll execute the rest of the plan cleanly. 3 independent things, all of which have to go your way at roughly the same time. The historical record on each one individually is uncertain. The probability of all 3 breaking your way is meaningfully lower than any single one of them. And if you're wrong on any of them, you don't just lose a small amount. You lose meaningfully because every month of waiting is rent paid with no equity behind it. This is the question worth carrying with you, whether or not you're Ryan. If you're waiting right now, your wait is implicitly betting on a specific combination of conditions. Most people who are waiting can't actually name those conditions. They're just hoping. The difference between waiting strategically and waiting hopefully is whether you've written the conditions down, and whether what you've written down has historically been a winning combination. So where does that leave you if you're actually in the market right now? There are 2 loud answers, and neither of them is great. The first is the agent's answer. Buy now, no matter what, because waiting always loses. That answer happens to be roughly right in this cycle, but it's not a strategy. It's a slogan, and it'll be wrong in some future cycle when conditions are different. The second is the waiting room answer. Wait indefinitely for rates and prices to both move in your favor at the same time. That answer assumes a combination of events that almost never happens together, and every month it doesn't. You pay rent with nothing to show for it. The third path is quieter. Before you decide whether to buy now or wait, actually write down the conditions your decision is betting on. If you're waiting, write the rate you're waiting for. Write the price you're hoping to pay. Write the time horizon you're prepared to wait, and then check whether that combination has historically been a likely thing to happen. If the answer is yes, you're waiting on something specific that the data supports and you've made a reasonable bet. If the answer is no, or if you can't write the conditions down at all, you're not waiting strategically. You're waiting hopefully, and hope doesn't show up in the math. The single most powerful question in this entire video wasn't whether David won or Ryan lost. It was the question we asked when we ran the flip. What would have to be true for the other path to win? That question works on your situation today, just as well as it worked on Ryan's in 2022. You're not deciding, should I buy or wait? No, you're deciding, what conditions am I betting on, and how likely are they? That's exactly why we built a tool for it. For our members, the Wealth Logicians, there's a calculator in the vault that runs this exact math on your own numbers. You plug in your current rate, the price of the house you want, how much you'd put down, the rate you're hoping to see, the appreciation you expect in your specific market, and your time horizon. It returns the break-even appreciation rate that flips the answer, the lifetime cost gap between buying now and waiting, and the rate drop you'd need for the wait to actually be worth it. You're not getting our opinion. You're getting your own answer on your own inputs with the same model we just ran on Ryan and David. That's what the vault is for. Real math. Run on your real numbers before the decision is made. But whether you ever touch the calculator or not, take the question with you. Every wait is a bet. Every bet requires conditions. Most people make the bet without checking what they're betting on. Now you don't have to. Ryan didn't run the numbers in 2022. He didn't have to be foolish to lose. He just had to assume that the strategy he'd been told was safe would hold 3 different ways at once. It didn't. Watch the headlines if you like. Listen to the forecasts. Just don't mistake hope for a strategy. The math is honest in a way the marketing isn't, and once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. I'll see you in the next one.